Now available in paperback and coming to Kindle Unlimited. John Haynes, Dark Succubus. The man who rules the world is tempted by a sultry succubus in this all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get John Haynes, Dark Succubus in paperback or pre-order on Kindle Unlimited today. Last week, the Democratic Party had two presidential debates. And after these two presidential debates, I believe that the choice for Americans should be none of the above for 2020, just like it was none of the above for 2016. And the reason why I believe it should be none of the above is because when I take a critical examination of these Democratic candidates, none of these individuals presented a vision for where they wanted to take the country for the next 4 years. And if you're going to be the leader of the United States and run the executive branch of the United States, you should be able to present a cohesive vision for where you want to take the country in the 4 years that you're going to be president of these United States on day one. So when I look at these candidates and the first impression they gave me on that stage, all I saw were a group of people who were more in their feelings rather than presenting a cohesive argument. And this is the big problem with all of these Democratic candidates, is that they were more in their emotions than they were about presenting a cohesive argument to why they are qualified to be the president of these United States. And this is the big problem with the Democratic Party and their supporters. They are so caught up in their emotions about Donald Trump that they're not thinking about how they're going to present a counter message to we, the people of the United States, and why we should vote for them. Because as they are out here campaigning, they have to show us why they are qualified to run the United States and run the executive branch of the United States, and they have to give us a vision for where they want to take the country in 4 years. And I didn't hear any sort of mission statement for the United States from any of these candidates. All I heard were a whole host of big promises that a lot of these people would not be able to deliver on. And a lot of these candidates were talking about offering lots of free stuff to people. However, the big problem with America is we're already in $22 trillion in debt because of Donald Trump's tax cuts, and giving out more freebies is only going to drive the country even further into debt. So when I listen to these campaign promises that make no logical sense, like going out here and giving student loan forgiveness, or going out here and giving undocumented immigrants free health care, this stuff makes absolutely no sense. And it really does not come from a place of confidence. It comes from a place of desperation. And when I look at the Democratic Party, I see a political party that is extremely desperate. And it's extremely desperate because it really has not taken the time over the last 3 years to come up with a cohesive argument for where they want to take the country in the next 4 years, or what direction they want to take the country in the next 4 years. It's like they spent the last 3 to 4 years sitting there being upset over Hillary Clinton's loss in the 2016 election, and they haven't formulated a strategy on how to beat Donald Trump. And that's the other big problem with the Democratic Party, is that they're so caught up in their feelings over Donald Trump that they cannot present a cohesive argument to why the American people need to pick their candidates. And this was the other problem that derailed the Democratic Party back in 2016, was that they were so caught up, they were so overconfident about your Donald Trump being the Republican nominee that Hillary Clinton took Donald Trump for granted. She took Donald Trump's supporters for granted, and she thought she had it made because she was a woman. And I see the same sort of hubris affecting the Democratic Party again, because when they were out here debating, they were out here pandering to Hispanic voters because they believe Hispanic voters are going to be the base that elevates them. However, I believe that that's a very critical mistake for the Democratic Party, because when it comes down to many Hispanic Americans do not identify with undocumented immigrants. Many Hispanic Americans do not relate to the struggles of undocumented immigrants, and many Hispanic Americans see themselves as white, with the growing numbers of them joining racist groups like neo-Nazis and skinheads. And many of these Hispanic Americans, they are out here, and as they come into the country as legal American citizens, they are voting more and more Republican. So when I look at that strategy to pander to the Hispanic voting base, I see a strategy that is going to fail miserably for the Democrats, because when I look at that strategy and I see the voting demographics for the 2016 election, where you had 30% of Hispanic men and 30% of Hispanic women voting for Trump, I believe that there's going to be a larger voting base going back out to vote for Trump once again. Because when it comes down to the Hispanic American sees themselves as white, and they don't see the struggles of undocumented migrants as their struggle. So that's where I see a huge mistake for the Democrats, asking to give freebies to these undocumented immigrants, because Hispanic Americans who have come to the country legally don't see this as something positive. They see this as people taking away from their tax dollars. Moreover, they see it as people coming into the country not the way that their grandfathers and fathers came in legally and through a documented process of bureaucracy. They see it as undermining the process, and they also see it as a way of them taking jobs from them and making people who are Hispanic Americans' lives harder, because a lot of times when it comes down to undocumented immigrants, they participate in a lot of criminal activity. So when it comes down to the Democrats on the whole position of immigration, I believe they are making things worse for themselves, and the promises that they make of free stuff doesn't really energize the Hispanic voting base to go out here and vote for them. Just like the whole plan for the whole student loan forgiveness, this is another big promise that they're going to make that they're not going to be able to keep, because it's going to alienate all of those people who paid their loans on time. And while we have a student loan crisis and a debt crisis as a result of this, what there needs to be done, again, this has to be done by corporate America, where they have to start lowering these crazy, unrealistic standards, talking about how you need degrees for jobs, and that's being done right now. And also we need to get more people into the skilled trades. So I don't see where the Democrats are offering anything on the table that gives you an incentive to vote for them with student loan forgiveness. Again, it feels like the junior high school kid who's promising no homework and pizza every day. Now, the other big problem, what I saw with those Democrat debates over the last week, was the way they completely disrespected the entire black voting bloc. Now, Hispanics have grown to become the largest population of voters. However, when it comes down to the black vote is one that has been taken completely for granted by Barack Obama, completely taken for granted by Hillary Clinton, and is still being taken for granted by this large group of Democrats who believe that they have the black vote sewn in the bag. And that's a huge mistake that the Democrats, I believe, are making. Because when it comes down to black voters have been deeply frustrated ever since Barack Obama and Eric Holder refused to do anything about George Zimmerman. And when Barack Obama and Eric Holder did nothing about George Zimmerman, that's what caused a major rift between the black community and the Democratic Party. And that rift is continuing to grow, because when we look at these Democratic candidates, the way they ignored the black community, it's giving black people more and more reasons to stay home because these Democrats have blown off one of the larger voting bases, and that voting base has been staying home in 2018, and I believe that that voting base is going to stay home in 2020 because the Democrats have not given black people a reason to go out to vote for them. Now, if anything, when I look at your President Trump, even though I do not like President Trump, he has done some things to sway black voters. And one of the things he did early on was try to help out the HBCUs that were struggling. And then we look at what he did with Kim Kardashian in trying to get prison reforms through. So Donald Trump, even though I do not like him, he has made efforts to reach out to the black community. He has made efforts to deal with issues in the black community, and in some cases has made some inroads with the black community. Because when black people look at what Barack Obama did and the way he completely blew off black people, all that did was alienate a major voting base for the Democratic Party. A Democratic Party, I believe, that has taken the entire voting bloc of black voters completely for granted and thinks that they're the only people who will vote for them are black people, and they believe that these votes are guaranteed. But what we saw in the 2020 election, not the 2020, the 2016 presidential election, was that 7% of black men went to vote for Trump, all because your Barack Obama did nothing about the police officers and men like George Zimmerman, who killed Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, Michael Brown, and many other black men. And they were looking to Barack Obama to bring some sort of federal charges, but his two attorney generals, Eric Holder and Loretta Lynch, did absolutely nothing. And because they did absolutely nothing, this is what led to many black male voters walking away from the Democratic Party, and Barack Obama's complete contempt for black people made more black people not to want to even go to the polls because they believed in his promise of hope and change, but they got no sort of change at all. And when you look at this group of Democratic candidates, they don't really bring any sort of plan for change. They don't bring any sort of real issue for change. They don't really bring any sort of platform for change. Outside of the argument that Donald Trump is a racist, they have absolutely nothing to offer. And that's what's going to be, I believe, their downfall, because if you don't have a strong counter-argument to go out here and run for president of the United States, it's going to be like 1984 when Ronald Reagan was running for president and he promoted his successful Morning in America campaign. Because back in 1984, the Democrats decided to run Walter Mondale, the vice president under Jimmy Carter, and this campaign that he ran was extremely unsuccessful because Ronald Reagan had a strong economy, he had a strong job market, he had a country that was going in a solid direction, and he had a lot of positives going for him. And Mondale's argument at the time in 1984 was Ronald Reagan was bad. And that's the same thing I see happening with Donald Trump in 2020, is that the Democrats' argument is Donald Orange Man bad, and Orange Man bad is not an argument that is good enough to get a Democratic candidate elected in these United States. No, you need a lot more than Orange Man bad in order to energize your voting bases, to energize your voting blocs, and to give those voting blocs an incentive to go out here and run out here to vote for you. So when I look at this whole argument of Orange Man bad and we want to give you free stuff so that you won't vote for the Orange Man, this is not a strong campaign that the Democrats candidates are running, and pandering to people who are not citizens And offering freebies to people who are not citizens is not a way to get your Hispanic American citizens an incentive to vote for you. This is the other mistake that your Democrats are making right now, trying to go out here and win support for those who are not a part of this country, further alienating the citizens who are a part of this country and who have the right to vote for you. And they're going to take their right to vote and they're going to use it not to vote for you, but to vote for Donald Trump for another 4 years, because when they take a critical examination of your America under Donald Trump, it may not be as great as Donald Trump promised it to be, but at least it's still their America, and we the people still have some choices under your Donald Trump that we wouldn't get from a Democrat candidate, a candidate who is more about helping people outside of the country instead of putting Americans first. And that was the big problem I saw with Barack Obama back in his second term, was he wasn't putting Americans first. He wasn't putting black Americans first, or the group that voted for him in the largest majority, and he wasn't going out here looking at his voter base and trying to find ways to deliver the goods to his voter base. No, because he thought he was this elitist, he was aloof and disconnected from his voter base, and he blew off major voter bases that put him in office. Groups like white women, groups like black men, groups like Hispanics, and those groups walked away from Barack Obama because they didn't get the hope and change that they were promised, and they didn't get the hope and change that he said he was going to bring. Instead, all we got from Barack Obama was an empty suit that looked good on the outside but didn't deliver the goods. And when we look at these Democratic candidates, all we're getting are a group of empty suits that make a bunch of promises they can't keep and are offering free stuff like a nice guy in the hopes of trying to get people to vote for them. But none of these candidates have presented a cohesive vision for where they want to take the country. None of these candidates have set a plan for the next 4 years, and none of them have set a cohesive idea of where they want the country to go. And that's why I can honestly say that, just like I said for 2016, I want none of the above for these presidential candidates, and I want none of the above for these candidates as related to the president for 2020. Because when I take a critical look at both the Democrats and Donald Trump, I see no real vision for the country. I see no real direction for the country, and I see no real set of goals being set by either the president or the Congress, who spend most of their time trying to bicker and argue with each other and go back and forth with each other like a bunch of dysfunctional ghetto folk. I see no real cohesion, and this is a big problem that I see with the state of our union, in that we're not working together, and that's tearing us apart, because when it comes down to our country, there is no real vision for the country, no real direction for the country, and no one is setting any sort of constructive goals to bring a real sense of cohesion to the country, or to make the country competitive as it is. Because as your Donald Trump said he wanted to make America great again, I don't see it being great, nor do I see it being great under the Democrats. So when I look at both parties, that's why I can honestly say none of the above for 2020, because none of these people can bring anything to the table that will deliver money to the American people. If you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to try some of my SJS Direct publications, like The Man Crisis, the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, and the Smith-Storella trilogy, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.